Today on the Topping Show, Vivek on the NSA not wanting to get a warrant for each spying instance, Tucker Carlson on Moscow subway versus American subway, Warren Buffett sold 10 million Apple shares in Q4. We break down his top trades as well as overall portfolio. Walmart may want to buy Vizio. National MS Society fires a 90-year-old volunteer for not knowing pronouns. And Delta forced to land a plane because of maggots. All of that and much more on the Topping Show. Thank you everyone for taking the time to tune in today. Today's episode of Topping Show is proudly sponsored by Topping Technologies. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency IT security. Heck, I see their founder at least, Troy Stay. Gotta say he's quite handsome and brilliant. He's me, you see, that's the joke. If you're an IT labor business owner, reach the team at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of February, so if you could click that button and let your friends know, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, going over to the business part of the podcast, you have Warren Buffett sold 10 million Apple shares. Now, he is perhaps the best trader in history, bar none. As the youth might say, he's a GOAT of trading, or also known as the greatest of all time. Perhaps only second to Nancy Pelosi, who, magically, she just is a more successful trader than Warren Buffett, the best of all time. I wonder how that is. Nevertheless, when you break down Warren Buffett's portfolio, he made some big changes in Q4, and we're just finding about them now. Now, one of the top changes in terms of increasing his shares comes in from Chevron, which, again, depending on where you live geographically, you may not know. It's one of the largest petroleum manufacturers, distributors, and drillers out there. So he increased his stake by 14%. Now they have $2.5 billion of Chevron stock in the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. You also have OCY Occidental, which again is another petroleum company. Warren Buffett increased their stake by 2% to $251 million value. You have LSXMK getting a 12% increase in their holding, now up to $162 million. One of the biggest increases, bar none, is SiriusXM. And Warren Buffett just went and he increased his shares by 316%, giving them a current value of $153 million of SiriusXM stock, which to me, that's one of the biggest outliers that I've seen in terms of portfolio holdings. Because again, SiriusXM, I'm trying to remember what decade was it when Howard Stern was still relevant. I suppose he sees a lot of things we don't. Perhaps I'm suspecting he sees a lot of upside in the future. Now, keep in mind, right now, it's a podcapolis or some type of funny word for podcasts going out of business. A lot of them are losing money. And the companies that are buying exclusivity rights with those podcast creators, those relationships aren't as fruitful as they thought. The best use case, bar none, would be Joe Rogan. Spotify gave a exclusivity deal with him a couple years ago. And when that deal came up for renewal a couple weeks ago, they decided to no longer be mutually exclusive. So now Joe Rogan is now on all the other major podcast providers, including the ones such as Apple Podcast, as well as, it seems like all the ones are fading into existence. Stitcher used to be a popular one. They're no longer around. But, so a Google Podcast, that's going to be renamed April 6th? That one's going to be going away. I think that we're going to force you to use YouTube Music or something like that. But it's no longer exclusive because I don't think that both parties are making as much money as they were hoping to, and they were decreasing the audience. So it's a pretty cutthroat industry, especially when it comes to music royalties. There's like 3 to 4 companies that own a majority of all the intellectual property when it comes to your favorite old bands and albums from back in the day. So even if they get these contracts with those companies, because of course those companies just get to print money, basically they own the intellectual property, right? They do a license agreement where they make a certain percentage or amount of money per time the video or the music is played. So when you look at companies like Spotify, a lot of that money going to Spotify from customers is going right back to the people who own the intellectual property. So SiriusXM, they've been pushing hard to increase their viewership throughout the years. To me, they are almost stuck in a rut in terms of anecdotally speaking, my experience with SiriusXM was it came free with the General Motors product. So I got a used Chevy Cruze for my first vehicle, which I loved because it had 3 pedals to stick shift, as all vehicles should have by default. And as a certified used, you got like a little subscription for a couple months free SiriusXM. Truth be told, I don't know anyone actually who pays for SiriusXM, but I knew it from that contract and that relationship. But they're really just known for Howard Stern, who's decreasing in popularity. Granted, he's still one of the top performers out there, but to me, that's one of the biggest outliers. Now, you also have an increase of Berkshire Hathaway holdings in LXMA that increased 17%, and that's at $107 million of value right now. And then you go to the things where they just cashed out. So Warren Buffett, and obviously he's the owner of Berkshire Hathaway, they got rid of all of their Globe Life stock, which I was pretty shocked because, again, one of the most profitable and actually profitable as well as time proven products out there, or you can debate it's a service, is insurance companies. I mean, it gives a lot of people peace of mind. Statistically speaking, you make more money than you pay out. That's how they profit and they grow. But they got rid of all their Globe Life stock, and they sold $96 million, 100% out. They also get rid of all their stock for Stone CO. That's 100%, 154 million sold out. Markel, MKL, that sold out, 100% gone, 230 million. Again, granted, I'm sure he's making a profit off of these, but I mean, that means he has a 0% stake in these companies now. It's all gone. You also have Paramount. Interestingly enough, he decreased that, but not 100%. He decreased it by 32%. Now, that means they made $421 million in that sale, which, again, the streaming wars is a big thing. And, again, another precarious thing where a lot of those companies still aren't making money. Disney Plus is still not profitable. That perhaps being the most famous ones that isn't the default for many, which is Netflix or Amazon Prime. Not to brag that I like to say I'm part of the 1% of Americans who don't have Amazon Prime or Netflix. But I do have lots of books, which, depending on how old you are, we might have to define. It's like a magazine without pictures, and it's made of paper, which is what, if you go outside, the trees, they make the paper. But nevertheless, I digress. So they got rid of 32% of that. Now, another one that I saw was strange was a little curveball. He completely liquidated or sold off all the stock in D.R. Horton, which is one of the largest home manufacturers in the United States. They're a huge construction company. They make everything from single-family homes to whole neighborhoods. They'll construct them. I mean, Warren Buffett 100% sold their stock. So that's a pretty penny of money they got back. That sale is $774 million, which is quite a pretty penny to say the least. And I should clarify, a pretty vintage penny, which is made of actual copper and worth something. Modern pennies are 99.99% zinc, and then they're copper plated. So just a little scratch and you'll see the real worthlessness inside. Perhaps a sad metaphor for United States currency. But nevertheless, got rid of that. Now, in terms of Apple, again, they sold that. I was still pretty shocked to hear that, to say the least. So they sold 10 million Apple shares, which, again, now, the headline sounds astronomical. Like, I mean, to me and you, granted, to have 10 million Apple shares, geez Louise, well, I love my little Honda Civic Si, so I would probably still own it and love it. But, geez Louise, I would probably also get a couple of vintage cool cars as well. But again, they only decreased their portfolio, their stake in Apple by 1%, which goes to show how much overwhelming value that they have of Apple stock in general for the whole Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. We'll break down the whole thing in a second here. Now, that came in at a sale of $1.8 billion. So they sold off 1% of their Apple stock. They got $1.8 billion. That is pretty penny, to say the least. They also decreased 78% of their stake in Hewlett-Packard, which, again, not the greatest branding in terms of Hewlett-Packard is now two separate publicly traded companies. You have the company that I used to be a part of, which is Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which was servers, storage, and networking. So basically think of the enterprise things where, the Wi-Fi you see in some stores. Well, they bought Aruba Networks and rebranded that. But nevertheless, it was the infrastructure stuff that most businesses use and only a couple of people, tech enthusiasts would have at their actual homes. No one really has a server in their house. Well, except for if you're Hillary Clinton, for reasons. I should clarify, just for the record, I do enjoy life and plan to live it to the fullest. Just throwing that out there. Now, again, they got $2.2 billion for the sale of, of the Hewlett-Packard stock. And those are some pretty big moves. Now, in terms of going into their overall portfolio, we'll do the top 10 in terms of valuation of their stock or the valuation of the portfolio. So if you look at the whole portfolio of Berkshire Hathaway, 44.8% of the portfolio is Apple stock. So they have 905,560,000 shares of Apple stock. They have a 5.9% stake of Apple. So of all the Apple stock out there, they own 5.9% of that. And with the current market value, now granted, by the time this video is rendered and uploaded on the internets, it'll fluctuate a little bit. But relatively speaking, that gives them a current Apple value of stock at $165,717,480,000, which is quite a lot, to say the least. And you look at Warren's long-term investment strategies, and Apple is one of the best companies when it comes to building a brand and a culture around the brand. People will buy darn near anything they make as long as it has the Apple logo on it. And kind of like the Dallas Cowboys. Doesn't matter if they win or not. They will print money because they have the loyal fan base that believes in the brand, which is obviously a hugely important factor. there are actually people going out there and buying the nerd goggles that Apple makes called the Apple Vision 2, which costs more than, let's say, a moderately good used vehicle off them Craigslist. And yeah, those nerd goggles cost like $3,500 before tax, before warranty, and all that kind of stuff that you usually have to pay for. And people are still buying it. So Apple is hugely profitable. It's actually one of the most profitable tech companies on the planet. At least 2019, they were the most profitable company in the world, which is insane considering they make software and hardware. And they're more profitable than oil companies, pharmaceutical companies. Apple was the top dog a couple years ago. So an extremely impressive performing company when it comes to their books and a little bit of their technology, I would suppose. Now, the second stock that is the biggest in the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio is Bank of America, and that comes in at 9.5% of the portfolio of Berkshire Hathaway. This shows a huge stark contrast with how much they're invested in Apple and how much Warren Buffett believes in Tim Cook and Apple. Again, nearly half of the value of Berkshire Hathaway is in Apple stock. Now, in terms of the Bank of America, that comes in at 9.5% again, and they have geez Louise, I can't imagine having this many shares of a stock. 1,032,852,006 shares, and they have 13.1% of the share of the company. So of all the shares out there, they own 13.1%. That gives a market value of 35. Oh, that's almost sad compared to Apple. This is nothing. Only $35,116,968,204. Third company is American Express, which, again, one of the most time-proven companies out there. Spoiler alert, he has a couple of financial firms that are very similar, Capital One, Visa, very consistent companies. Again, none of this is financial advice. I would always debate the best value you can get in terms of investing is bet on yourself by learning a new trade or starting a business, but I partially digress. So in terms of American Express, they own 20.9% of the company. So that's one of the largest companies that they own. They have one of the largest stakes. That's one of the biggest ones. Now, they own 151,610,700 shares of American Express, and that comes in at a value of $32,475,011,940. And they own, that's 8.8% of the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. You also have Coca-Cola, which he's a longtime supporter. They have 400 million shares of Coca-Cola, owning 9.3% of the total company. And that gives them, it translates to 6.4% of the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. In terms of the dollar amount, they have $23,776,000,000 worth of Coca-Cola shares of the company. You also have Chevron, which again, we just talked about a New York minute ago, and Occidental Petroleum. Then you have Kraft Heinz, which they own 26.5% of that company with 325,634,818 shares of the company, giving them a market value of $11,371,167,845, making up 3.1% of the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. And then everything else drops precipitously. I mean, again, these are still, they own billions of dollars of these companies, but in terms of the percentage of the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio, we start to get into the, what is it? They have Moody's, Mitsubishi, that's 2%, and then everything else is 1%, a lot of 0.5%, a lot of 0.1%. So it'll be interesting to see. He made some big moves, and it's going to be a fascinating year when it comes to financial investments and a lot of markets that is just unprecedented economic and political uncertainty. It'll be interesting to see which businesses flourish and which, unfortunately, may perish. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in again. We're trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of February, so if you click that button, I greatly appreciate it. Also, sharing the video is a great way to assist me growing the audience, and giving a thumbs up, thumbs down, or just leaving a comment gives me some additional feedback on how I can make the show better and better. Lastly, don't forget to take the time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.